Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 8 of my Pyanodons playthrough. In this episode, we are going to tackle tar processing, which is the first major fluids processing chain of Pi. Enjoy. And I was eyeballing ceramic here. We get 2 new machines, the clay pit, a building to mix and extract clay from the ground. So it's another generate something from nothing building, but you can think of it as digging clay off the ground. I like how the description of clay is just clay, but steam goes in and clay comes out. So it's not that it's turning steam into clay, but the steam is powering the machine to dig the clay. And then we can make ceramic with a little bit of coke and mostly clay in a high pressure furnace. And we have unlocked the electronics factory, which is probably our new most expensive building. That's basically 1,000 plates that go into one building, but it makes electronic parts. And we have a new recipe for air core inductors that instead of using iron, uses ceramic, and we'll calculate that recipe. But it's not that we really need this, but it's a more efficient way of making air coils, so why not? And it just so happens that everything we need is going to be nearby. However, the big thing here is tar processing. It's our first true foray into the fluids of Pi after getting a little sample of it by making coke. We unlock the tar processing unit, which processes various tar related things. Luckily, it is not a very expensive building, and it doesn't use very much power either, asterisk. And also, we have the quenching tower, temperature control and gas conditioning through evaporative cooling, condensing, and heat transfer. And lots of recipes. So the main recipe here is the tar refining bottoms, which we take tar and also a bunch of steam. So in other words, that is a hidden energy cost, is the steam, to give us middle oil, creosote, anthracene, and pitch. And then we have to process all of those, keeping in mind that most of them are burnable. However, the fuel value of them all is kinda bad, so they're not really worth burning. That middle oil can be broken down with a bunch of steam again into light oil, carbolic oil, and naphthalene. Light oil can be processed in a distillation column to make aromatics and gasoline. Anthracene can be processed into coke and gasoline, and the pitch can be broken down in a distillation column with more steam to make a lot of coke, hydrogen, light oil, naphthalene, and anthracene. Are you following all of that? Additionally, we have some other recipes that use tar, where we can just process tar directly to give us rich clay, flue gas, carbon dioxide, and aromatics. And this is another one of those recipes where it's not entirely clear what the point of the recipe is. It just gives you stuff, but the title of the recipe is carbon dioxide. So that is the point of the recipe, is to make carbon dioxide, and that other stuff just comes along with it. We have another one, tar quenching, where tar and water goes in, and we get soot, tailings, flue gas, and saline water. And this one doesn't quite tell you the point, but the point of it is the saline water. Everything else is byproducts. And finally, we have some other recipes here where if we take 5 stone and put in some pitch, we'll get 4 stone bricks. And that reduces the stone requirement to make bricks, where previously 8 stone went in, but if we put in pitch, now only 5 goes in. So that is the better way of making bricks. And in fact, you can actually generate infinite stone with this recipe. You have to put the pitch in, but you can put in 5 stone to get 4 bricks and then crush them down in the jaw crusher to get 8 stone back. And that will generate stone, but without a circuit network and loaders and that kind of thing, it's a little derpy. And even then, I don't know if that's really worth it. It's just stone after all. And we can turn rich clay and sand into stone bricks. This isn't an efficient way of making bricks. It's basically just a way of processing that rich clay that you might collect. There's a second recipe here that we want to follow, because the dump of all of the resources will be creosote, because we can take carbolic oil to make it, naphthalene oil to make it, and anthracene oil to make it. So basically all of the byproducts can get turned into creosote. And then if we take 1 wood and a bunch of creosote, we can make 2 treated wood. And what's interesting about treated wood, the description says better than raw wood. It is. A single wood has 2 megajoules of energy, but treated wood has 4. So what that means is we're taking 2 and turning it into 8. So we'll be able to dump creosote and make a decent fuel. I don't know if it's necessarily the best thing to do because of all the steam that goes into this setup. I mean, it's better than just dumping the resources, and that's a very small amount of wood for what you're getting. Right now, our wood is so rare we don't really want to do that, so we'll probably just be storing the creosote, but sooner rather than later we'll be able to dump it. And then we get another recipe of copper cable and treated wood to make 3 poles. So previously we're putting 1 log to make a pole, and I think 1 log made 5 wood, and now that 5 wood is essentially going to make 10 electric poles. So it's way more efficient. And I didn't mention this with the air core inductors, but most recipes in Pi have like a second tier that is way better than the first one. It's still the same item, but it's just a different way of making it. So we'll hit that, and now we have some things to do. It's nice that the only resource that we're super low on now is iron, and it will probably take some time for it to go out because it only gets reduced when we need steel. And another thing I noticed is it looks like some of the starfish flour has decayed into biomass, which is where it stops decaying. We could burn it, but it's such a tiny amount of stuff, and this isn't really that much of a problem. I have no issues just letting it sit here and do its thing. It's going to be many, many hours before this ever fills up, so I don't see it as an issue. And since we have so many resources, I guess we can just fill up on everything without reserve. All right, we have ceramic. Let's make a build. And here we go. I've made the numbers the same as our current build just to get an idea of what goes in, where it's a little more than half a plate, and the tiniest amount of coke will make 0.29 air core inductors, and the same build, doing it the old way, was 1.16 copper and a little bit of iron. So the iron doesn't change too much, but it does drop the copper requirement basically in half. And of course, this machine was limited based on how much copper cable we needed, and we needed a lot, whereas this one does not have that problem. So we can actually go a lot faster out of a single machine. And I've scaled it up a little bit, that this is the inserter limit if we have 2 burner assemblers on each side of the electronics factory, but the factory is so expensive I kind of don't want to. So let's scale it down to just 1 factory, and it just so happened to be a 1-to-1 ratio, but we're still going to need 2 machines because of inserter limitations, and that will require 1.1 clay pit, so I kind of want to walk it back more, so we only need 1 clay pit, and that looks good. Well, since we're here, let's build one of the new machines we have and put them in the shrine of machines we haven't used before. That's the tar machine, and that's the quencher, so we can remind ourselves that we haven't used a machine. I know, I'm weird. We won't need the old setup, so we might as well remove it. It actually took up a lot of space in here, so we have room for something else if we need it. We can't see the inserters unless we put it right there, and then we can see it. And then we need to do the clay, and this machine is like a miner where it just has an unloading arrow, so we can just point it directly towards the other building. We can't walk between them, but that's easier than the alternatives. Would it be practical to get rid of the ash here? You know, I'm guessing this isn't going to run very much, that this is basically here temporarily just to give us more efficient air cores, and eventually when we start making circuits, that'll probably be the better place to grab them. So I don't think these burner assemblers are ever going to fill up on ash while they're in operation. So I'll say no. I'll put the coke on the upper side, so if we do want to put ash on that belt, it would fit. But in it goes, making clay. And yeah, this is one of those other buildings that's just digging dirt out of the ground, basically. It's a mine you can put anywhere, and Pi has a lot of those kind of buildings in it. So, we've cooked up some ceramic, and that was an achievement, and luckily, it's not a burner, so don't need to worry about ash. But there we go. It's a small improvement, but one no less, and I see we're getting flickers and orange lights, which means we have basically maxed out our power plant. You do have to be careful about maxing out your power. A lot of times your fuel comes from electric sources. In this case it doesn't, but yep, we need more power now. And we could build another power plant, but we do have a power option that we haven't used yet, the fish turbine. It's only going to make power worse as we build them, but and it uses a lot of air coil, so I guess I'm glad that we have made those. And there is a Pi entry for this. Come all the way down here to wind energy, and you could pause the video and read that if you'd like. But the big thing is to look at the different turbines and see what kind of power output they have. So this is a multi-blade turbine. It's cheap, but it has a low power output and a very high variance. The variance is 90%, and the average power is 550 kilowatts. So what that means is it goes from 100% power to 10% power. and the average is 55% power. So in other words, the turbines are a 1 megawatt output at their greatest and 100 kilowatts at their least. And they need 10 spaces between them to operate correctly. So knowing that, it's important not to go overboard with wind turbines because then your factory won't be able to process its byproducts. And right now there's actually not that many that are actually making it down here, but nonetheless, you don't want to fully power your factory by wind or other renewables unless you have a surefire way of getting rid of the byproducts. And right now we definitely don't. They have to be burned here. So for the early game, I found that a good rule of thumb is a 1-to-1 ratio of wind energy to coal energy. And we've already calculated it here, that we basically want 12 steam engines for 45 megawatts, but we're actually doing slightly less than that. So it's 3.7 times 12. So we have a target of 44 turbines, and each turbine requires 5 fish. So it means we need 220 fish, because not much is going to happen without that. We haven't grabbed any fish yet, but this is what the swimming mod is for. So we can go out here and actually get them. And there we go. You will notice that this is a module. It has speed and pollution. So we are going to need fish eventually, but right now we just need them for the turbines. And I think that's actually kind of cool. It's also kind of dumb that you're turning fish into turbines, but I think the creators wanted to limit how many turbines you could build in the beginning, so they're requiring you to run around grabbing fish. And it looks like the closest fish will be out here. Sorry that it's nighttime while we do this, but it is what it is. Being able to swim in any water does make finding them a lot easier than just being stuck to the shore constantly, especially considering this ocean here has no shallow water at all, so we would be highly limited on the fish we can grab. And the grapple gun is convenient for getting back to shore. We can't go into the water with it, but we can get back to the shore quickly. Also, the fish don't decay, so that's nice. Not that we're going to hold any more than is absolutely necessary because we aren't fighting biters and don't need to heal. The funny effect of the fish being a module, it means they appear on our placeables menu, so I can count how many fish we have just by looking there rather than having to open the inventory. They are quite hard to see. It's not too bad with the lighter night settings, but if we had darker nights, this would be very hard to see. These fish have no idea they're about to be turned into a machine. Okay, looking good. And achievement unlocked. This is actually going to take a lot of wood, surprisingly, because we need all these poles. We went through those air core inductors pretty quickly, so there's some more. Our poor factory, because grabbing all that steel is consuming even more power. Alright, so where do we want to build all these things? Well, as an example, this is what they look like. And you don't really know what the space is that they require, you just have to try to place one to find out that it's that. I mean, these could go anywhere, so ideally we'd want to build them somewhere where they will never get in the way. And picking somewhere nearby a bunch of cliffs sounds like a great idea because we'll never expand there. Well, there's no trees to cut down. I don't think trees block these in any way, but nonetheless, there's nothing to get in the way. So let's put them wherever they make sense. I'm not sure what shape this will end up being, but we'll just let it happen as it will. Is this gonna fit? Oh wow, that was amazing. Couldn't be any better. Oh wow, it fits again. Amazing. And we finally got unlucky. It won't fit there. Even so, it fit in there really nice. I love it when things work out. I'll run the power poles up through here. These short poles make it kind of inconvenient, but it is what it is. Also because the annoyance of setting these up is another reason why you don't want to go nuts with the turbines. Just because it's kind of monotonous. Like, it's actually not so bad right now because there's no trees or anything that you would have to cut down. But normally you would. But you just get access to better technologies, better renewables, better fossil fuels. So you don't really need to go nuts with this early stuff. Just build the minimum amount that keeps your factory running. Don't try to min-max it. Alright, all the power is in there. It's time for some lights. And can we place them this far away? Would that work? Seemingly. These are pretty bright lights. Not that we have to look at our turbine farm at all, but it's nice to have the coverage. Well, we need to get the power back somehow, and we already have a belt here, so We might as well use it. What? No coal for copper? Looks like it's just running out, too. We will find out on the way back. This is so far. And there we go. Seeing the turbines kick in, you can see what happens here, that they actually have priority over your steam engines. So that's why you don't want to have too many turbines, because then the steam engines don't run and you're not burning any byproducts. It's funny seeing them be exactly the same amount. And the steam engines are kicking on a little bit at a time, but yeah, that is what it is. So why didn't we get any of the coal? Oh, just because it's being used for all of that coke. I'm kind of thinking, as annoying as it would be, we need to pull the coal from this side, because clearly it's not the one that's running. So that will make sure resources are available. And yeah, we're running out of coal gas too. And there we go, lights are placed. Eventually the coal will get back here and everything will be good. And look at that, we actually have some stuff we have to clear off. Okay then, we finished up a bunch of research related to processing tar, and we really want to get on top of it because our tar is about to be overloaded. And this build is sufficiently complicated that I feel I should show the full Helmod of this. So first we need to know how much tar do we actually need to process, and we're going to have 135, and if we want to include our aluminum, it's another 45. So we'll see what the numbers look like. We will start with the tar processing because this is basically a byproduct, so we don't really care what the output is, we care what the input is. First we'll go with just the coke at 135 and just see what it looks like. And it doesn't matter what we pick, we can just start with the thing on the front and see what it looks like. That'll be middle oil, and there's only one way to make it, so we'll just do it. Then we have anthracene, and we do actually have two choices. We could turn it into creosote or coke and gasoline. Creosote is kind of a byproduct right now. We certainly can use it, but 20 creosote really isn't that much because the recipe to turn it into treated wood I think was 100 creosote, whereas we can get 5 coke and 20 gasoline. The gasoline by itself would be 24 megajoules, and the coke would be another 25 megajoules, so that's gotta be better than turning it into creosote. And then the next thing here is pitch. We technically could turn it into bricks, but that will be a side process. So for now, we'll just use the main recipe, turns it into a bunch of stuff. And then we have anthracene again, but we're already processing it. So if we just put it at the bottom of the list, it'll get priority. So this middle oil, we only have one thing we can do with it. Turn it into aromatics and gasoline. And then the carbolic oil, it has to be turned into creosote. The naphthalene, it has to be turned into creosote. And of course, we want the coke. Hydrogen, there's nothing we can do. It is a burnable fluid, but it's only 100 kilojoules, so it's not really worth anything. The gasoline, of course, is a final product, and the aromatics, despite its name, it is a liquid. I believe the reason why it is named that way is because when it was chemically sorted is when they were sorting things based on how they smelled, as opposed to the chemical properties of it. So that's why it has a funny name. But looking at this, we are actually going to make 34.7 coke. So just like that, we are making a ton of coke. That's great. However, there is one hidden element to this, the 364.5 steam. So this is definitely a steam powered setup here. And if we were turning the coke into steam, then that means the coke couldn't be the limiting factor. And since we don't have any closed top containers, essentially none of these would be limiting factors. So it means this entire setup would run so long as tar was available. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because tar is a byproduct. Speaking of which, it's getting super full. I think we need another one. So there we go. It's running at 12,000 per second, and you can see the rate is going up quickly. So we have a few seconds to talk about this. That's not necessarily bad. It does mean, though, that our factory is still going to be super short on coke. The only coke it's going to be producing is what comes out of these machines, which isn't terrible, but coke is kind of a rare product right now. Do we really want to do that? The other thing we can do is make this steam with an entirely separate power plant, as substantial as it would be, and that means we would have a ton of extra coke around, and then that coke would be the limiting factor of all of this. It's still running as a byproduct, so it would need some kind of buffer, which the tailing pond would be a buffer. But that's another option. And what would we want to do? Well, if we were putting the coke back into this setup, we would make an enormous amount of byproducts. Whether we want them or not, shrug, but it seems very wasteful. Alright, it looks like it's slowing down now because it's starting to get empty, but it's not going to overfill, so let's just let it go. So we would need to have 4 belts of coal coming in to power this. It certainly wouldn't fit here, because we need these belts for other things. But we do have this coal mine up here, and it's not really being utilized, so it would be obnoxious to send 4 belts of coal down. But instead we could just make the steam here and send the steam down, and actually then convert this to potentially not being steam. And in doing so, that means that this setup would only run if we needed coke, and we just don't have a very efficient way of making coke now. This is better than before, especially because this coke is in addition to this. So this setup made 5.4 coke, and then with the byproducts, we get another 34.7 from it. Logistically, having that much coke would be difficult to deliver, but it's not going to be very long before we need more coke. Turning on the unresearched technologies here, of all the things coke goes into, we're going to need it for calcium carbide, which I believe goes into acetylene. We'll need it for carbon dioxide. We will need it for graphite. We're going to need it for high-powered resistors. So it actually goes into stuff. I know that a lot of people like using the coke to go back into it, but then we're just going to create so many byproducts that we're just going to be dumping, and it's going to feel bad. And it's just going to be a lot of ash, it's going to be a lot of everything. And it won't have a limiting factor, which is bad too. Something this big needs a limiting factor, and that being coke seems like a perfectly valid thing to do. So we have a build now. Creosote is the final place we'd want it. Right now we'll just store it, because using wood to make treated wood is kind of bad when we have so little of it to begin with. But we have a build, so I'm going to run around and grab some resources. Okay, we have all the buildings we need, and I cleared out even more trees. Can't really see it on radar, but you can tell someone was there. So let's go here, and then we can kind of put our cursor right here to know this is as low as it would go. So we can move up a little bit, and then we're right here, so it's a little bit above where we were. The tar processor is a huge building. But there's nothing special with how the pipes get set up. Just do it how you would any chemical plant. Is that something that copies? Barely, but it does. And the size of the building and the length of the pipes is exact. So you can place them 1 square away from each other and be able to walk between them. Okay, there's our 7. They very quickly become big setups. That's why I wanted so much space for this. It's not too important how we set this up, but it might be nice to simply align all of the pipes. And we could do the hazard concrete. It would slow us down though. I like to use hazard concrete just as a marker for bus lines. So I guess I'll make them. Don't really want to right now, but they are very visually striking. So you can see how that's actually even slower. I think it would be better just to use regular bricks for that. And then the pipes would come in here, and if they needed to go down, that is what the spacing would look like, just to give us a little bit of guidance. And one other thing we want to do is probably put a pump right here as stuff enters the bus, so they're all kind of pressurized more or less at the same place, and the extent will basically be the same. And we can also put pumps in here as well. It seems like overkill, and it kind of is, but what I'm thinking here is that you minimize the extent of the pipe by putting pumps as they are pushed into the machines that process stuff, and also as you put pumps in here to pressurize things as they enter the pipe bus, which means that basically any pipes that are in here ideally would basically need pumps at regular intervals, and it would just look a little cleaner. So in goes the tar. We're all good, but of course we need the steam too. And that is definitely something that we would send around here, because quite a few recipes need steam. And that is the white pipe, and it stops there. So we might as well try to keep it going and also line things up a little bit. So it probably makes more sense to push it up here instead. And we'll stagger them in the same way as the coal gas pipe here, just for aesthetics. And there we go. Put in the steam. The tar bubbles away. In creosote was apparently an achievement. First step completed, and then from here you just kind of pick whatever the next thing that's clogged is, so you can continue to test the system. It really doesn't matter the order you do them all in, but if you process the thing that's clogged, then that will allow you to see the next setup in line operate. And it certainly looks like it's going to be pitch here. Man, this thing holds a lot. And there we go. It's actually stuck on both of them, but it has more pitch, so Okay, we kind of want to line it up with this other building and give it a bunch of spaces just so we have any room we need. Okay, I think that's a pretty good copyable setup. There's a lot going on in there, but we have tons of fluids and also the coke. So it's a little crazy. So this should overlap, and yeah, seems to. We actually have to chop stuff down now to make room. And that's what the 10 looks like. We could stack them to make them denser here. It is tall after all, but it's really not that much taller than these other buildings. Plus, if they needed to expand, they would have a ton of room to go up. And that's because of a pipe visualizer there. So I think this is fine. Okay, this is one of those builds that you really hope it works the first time. Because there's so much going on in here that I really don't want to rebuild it again. Although it does look like I put in slightly too many pipes here, because it already has steam coming in on this side, so it doesn't need it on this one as well. Seems good. Let's get everything hooked up. And doing this just takes away this extent, which is 75 units from the pipe bus in general. It doesn't really matter at these short distances, but it can later to have all of the inputs and all of the outputs of these big stacks of machines with pumps, and then that separates the extent sections. Basically, the limit of extents is that when it's longer than the pipe extent, you can extend it, but it has to have a pump, which means it can only flow in one direction. So when you know that it only needs to flow in one direction, you might as well put a pump there just to take it off. And cutting out 78 out of 320 is actually a lot, so I would definitely recommend all pumps going in and out. And just put the pumps wherever they fit because of pipes being all over the place. You might have to get creative with where you put them. But in it goes. It gets broken down to all of those resources. And of course, the coke gets put on these two belts. It's not going to be 30, it's going to be 18.9, but nonetheless it kind of needs to be split evenly, so that's why we have one going there, one coming from up here, and then the same kind of side loading from up there. And out of all of the things that this makes, the only thing we can't currently process is the hydrogen. So we've got an exhaust pipe here just venting the hydrogen, but you can see how quickly and immediately we make a ton of coke. So much so that we can't even really utilize it. It's just too much. And then whatever the next limiting thing is, anthracene. And creosote is a final product, so we will want to put it somewhere. Where would we want to store the creosote? Well, it's going to go pretty far from here, so this is kind of a temporary measure. So for now, how about let's just place it on the end of everything else here. And now we're loaded on anthracene, and that's going to make the other coke. Okay, I think that's all of it. Where we have all of these belts, side loading and combining more coke. And ultimately that will give us 3-ish belts. It's slightly more than 2, so that's the ish part. So we need the anthracene. It seems like this slot isn't being used, so put in the pump, move the power poles as required, match up all of the colors. So in it goes, processing anthracene, making gasoline and wonderful coke, and they're all going. I was thinking that maybe putting the creosote up here isn't smart. I was just not wanting it to be near the pipe bus here because I wasn't sure how big it would get, but it probably should be down here. Whenever making a bus, always make it bigger than you think you need it, because somehow it always expands. And actually, let's do the tailings pond for the creosote first, so that way we can regain the use of the other one. And we'll just put it way down here. How come this one didn't run? Is there anything wrong with it, or just maybe the fluids didn't get down there? Well, it's interesting to look at on the tooltip here. Products finished, 42, and this one is 0. And in fact, if you look at it, it actually has a deconstruction planner on there for some reason. So I'm not sure what I did there, but that's probably what the problem was. Machines can't run when they are scheduled to be demolished. And that gives us our 3 belts. And doing this is going to be annoyingly difficult, but we essentially need 10 inserters per side. How about we just do 10 inserters off of these 2 belts? But for now, we can kind of swing in here, take a slot next to the tar, and then we need to pipe it into the back of this building. Because although we can't use the full output of coke, we want to try to use what we can. And 1 belt of resources is basically the most our factory can handle right now of any given thing, because No splitters. Now we're going to stop producing tar in such large quantities. And yeah, nothing's happening with this middle belt, but whatever. It should be more than enough. So the tailings pond is empty. We're storing the creosote. Let's do the same thing with gasoline. And there we go. Now this machine is loaded on middle oil. That is easy enough to process. And in fact, the actual setup of buildings is almost identical to what we got going on here. As a temporary measure, we could just put this down the center of here to let all three get dumped. Okay, we seem basically ready here. In goes the steam. And the more pipes you have, the harder it is to find a slot for something. You have to remember that we actually have one right here for tar, because we are going to use it for something else. It's a very distinctive red color. And in it goes, getting bubbled away. So now we are loaded up on pitch. And pitch is loaded up on a couple things, but naphthalene and light oil is maxed out. Let's do the light oil first. We're going to have one more output here that we can't do anything with. The aromatics. So another giant tailings pond. The gasoline will be sent to where it needs to go. So that means we just need the light oil input. I love it when everything is super straight like this. It looks like I put one too many pipes here because it's two separate pipes with oil in them. We did not need that. Gotta be careful. Sometimes outputs can be like that where there's 3 outputs but 4 pipe connections. But there it goes. 3 machines breaking down the light oil. Stuck on pitch. Stuck on the coke, and now naphthalene. So that's probably the next thing. Naphthalene simply needs 3 of these tar machines. And you can see that the machines that don't actually take steam don't really require that much energy. So most of the energy is going into breaking down the tar and then breaking down the pitch. And a little bit goes into breaking down the middle oil as well. But after you've done that, everything else is quite simple. And speaking of machines with way too many pipe connections, this one has a lot that you don't need. Now we need a line for the creosote. This is why I like to line up all the pipes like this, is because once you get them in the right positions, you can just drag and drop and not think about it. And all the pipes are magically lined up. And that should be both of them. Turning the naphthalene into creosote and making it disappear. So, filled up on pitch, filled up on coke, which is what we would expect. Those are empty, and those are clearing out, so they will be empty eventually. But it looks like it's going to fill up on carbolic oil, which essentially is the last thing we need to process, and we only need 1 machine for this. And I'm just kind of picking a distance for them. It doesn't really matter. Just like that, we've used up the first set of slots for pipes, so things expand quickly in Pi, and that is the correct distance. Basically, the way you keep an alignment is every time you expand something and it seems like it's the thing that's going farther than anything else, just make sure it is on the correct pacing here. So these other ones are stopping because they have to line up with their pipes. But as long as you pick one that is lined up correctly, then you can just keep going. So there goes the carbolic oil, making creosote. If we have done everything correctly, this should be a fairly closed system and everything will build up inside of our tailings ponds. And we've got 21k of creosote, 19k of gasoline, 12k of aromatics. Seems good. And we'll basically be maxed out on coke because that's a limiting factor right now and we just can't effectively use it, so we're pulling off what we can. You can see that it has completely filled up this belt, so this whole process is going to stop. And it's only going to run when tar completely runs out. But before we continue research here, there is one last thing we can do. We will dramatically improve our wood efficiency by making the electric poles out of the treated wood as opposed to the logs. And this is actually significantly faster and more efficient than what we had before. And we really don't need to have any more than like 1 tar processing unit doing this. So let's just do a setup around that. And I changed the fuels to be the treated wood because those are part of the ingredients and it's just going to be nearby and it won't create ash. So why not? So in goes the creosote. It's used as a fuel and it gets inserted. It's going to make 2 inserters worth of output, and it's nice not worrying about the ash now. We probably do want to have a few logs in our inventory though, because we are making those boxes. There we go. Very efficient making of the poles. Out of curiosity, let's see what they would have taken previously. and I made them all consume logs to make it as simple as possible. 0.9 power poles was about half a copper and 0.1 logs, whereas previously it was almost a full copper and almost a full log, so that is a huge improvement. So definitely do those recipes whenever you have them. But this seems like it's going pretty good. We're going to have to check up on it from time to time just to make sure all of this crazy sorting is working, but it should. It doesn't really need to run at full speed. This is definitely too big right now, but the reason why I've done it is because I'm thinking, well, in the future, we're going to, well, have splitters, but also we're going to need way more coke than we're using now. So we are going to be glad we built this pretty hardcore setup so it can handle our future needs and also expand even more if we need to. We are going to need creosote and aromatics for things. Gasoline, not so much, surprisingly. It's the one thing here we don't actually need for stuff. We can certainly use it. So if we end up not having enough of either of these, we might need to force this to run. But of course, another thing we can do is just send the belts to our fuel burners rather than doing a separate power plant. So we'll see how it works. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we're going to take our first foray into Pyanodon's alien life and start growing some plants. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.